Okay. Welcome, folks. I expected more. There could be an issue with the URL that I sent out. But seeing how we got a couple people in here, I'm not certain that that's the case. I got no other messages. We got Nikia visiting us from Redmond. She used to be the president of the DC SharePoint user group, and she has graciously accepted our request to present this month. If you can, provide her your full attention. Nikia?
Thanks, guys. And before I get started, because I only have one monitor, I will be trying to keep an eye on the chat as I'm going through. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat or just go ahead and pipe up. This presentation normally takes me around an hour, and then I got to skedaddle because I got a meeting like right after this, so I have to go as soon as I finish. But I'm so happy to be back talking to you all. I miss some of you, like Joel. Hey, Joel. Um, so anyway, before I get too crazy with it, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to talk to you guys about the importance of SharePoint community. And I say SharePoint community, but I basically mean tech community, period. Just community is very important. But before I get into it, most of you know me, but I'll just put my creds, street creds up here. Name's Nikia Carter. You can feel free to call me Nikki. I'm the worldwide modern workplace tech strategy lead at Microsoft now, but I used to be a partner, worked for a few partners, been in the SharePoint realm since 2009. Before that, I was an application internet developer. Have had many roles before I joined Microsoft, and I have a few new roles that I'm working on or in now that I'm in Microsoft. If you want to reach out, you can feel free to reach out to me, connect with me. LinkedIn, Twitter are my main two. I also have my own personal website as well. So we're going to talk about how technology is changing. It's basically changing at the speed of the cloud. In SharePoint technology, we've gone through a lot of changes. The first SharePoint technology named SharePoint, because there was a previous version of SharePoint before it actually got named SharePoint, was 2001. And then we kind of went along, more things were built up, more SharePoint technology was created over a number of years. SharePoint has gotten better and better and better. And we've all, well, some of us have been along for the ride, as well as for some of the side tools or first party tools that we've used, like Front Page. Anybody remember Front Page? I used to build some websites in Front Page. That's really really throwing it back there. But I remember I used to use it for I'm getting some crazy looking expressions on the chat. But yeah, Front Page was back there, boy. Then you had like Designer, SharePoint Designer, which I kind of miss SharePoint Designer a little bit. Just a little bit. InfoPath, I still miss it, even though we have our Power Apps that's starting to take it over. We got a few different versions of InfoPath. We also had some tools. So remember when SharePoint used to be SharePoint Server for everybody? And we had a bunch of different things that we used to use to build up a bunch of different solutions on SharePoint. And then we crossed over into the cloud. So things got better and then a little worse at the same time for those of us that were used to server. Things that we could build, we couldn't build anymore. We had to figure out new ways of building it. We had to go more client side instead of server side, which I don't know about you guys, but I love C# more than I love JavaScript. So that was a pain in the butt for me. But you got through it. You went there. We had our productivity apps that are coming up and are being becoming more robust as the cloud is evolving. The things here like Power Apps that took over for InfoPath, even though it's not the full replacements feature for feature as InfoPath, it is a lot more powerful than InfoPath is. And Flow, I think hands down better than Designer workflows. That's just me. I don't know if you guys have any opinions on that. Planner, Dynamics, of course, Teams, which some of us felt, well, I'll speak from my perspective, felt a little threatened by Teams until I realized that Teams wasn't really something to really be worried about. So these slides are just talking a little bit how, giving a little bit more detail on Teams, Power Apps, and Flow, and Power BI, which I happen to love because you can grab data from all these different places and just mash it up, and you can just make these really great looking reports, even for just simple data. Planner also was helpful because it's that projects, Microsoft Projects, but the light version. So you're not spending an arm and a leg on projects because projects is expensive. But you can kind of get that same or a lot of the same capability in the lighter version of Planner, and Dynamics for CRM and ERP. And then you have the cloud versions of those as well. So the momentum of Office 365 in this slide is, as you could see for the dates on here, is 2 years old. So the rate of growth is even more than this. But just from seeing it from 2 years ago, I mean, over 135 million active users on Office 365. And that's for the just commercial. Increased consumer subscriptions. Fortune 500 companies that have Office 365. I mean, pretty much everybody has it now. It used to be a thing where people didn't trust the cloud. Now everybody, especially with the COVID situation, are on the cloud and on Teams. Got an update. Says one of you guys says that now, Joe says that now Teams is 75 million users daily. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. And it's not slowing down, not going to slow down anytime soon. It's just going to keep on going and going and going. The rate is going to just continually catch fire. Now, you may be saying, okay, yeah, I know this is the thing that's going on. I understand. I've been in this industry for a little bit. Why the heck are you telling me all this? So I'm going to give you my why, and then I'm going to tie it back down to the reason why SharePoint community or tech community, but this community that you're in, that you're a part of, why is it so important? Long term and short term. So this is a picture of me. I think I was, let me see, I was probably about 6 here. Grew up poor in the city, Baltimore. Only 4 of these kids here are my siblings. So, I'm sorry, 3 of the kids here are my siblings. But basically, I grew up the oldest of 4 in inner city Baltimore. I was raised mostly by my mom because my parents split, and my dad isn't shown in the picture. But he stayed in the picture, but the household was not a household where I had a mom and dad. I started to learn how to code. So because my dad was still in the picture, my dad's one of those forward thinking people. Even though he can't do a damn thing with technology. I swear the man sometimes is just technology inept. But he saw, when he started seeing computers come out, and he started seeing like the shows back then when they would show the big computer that took up the whole room, those big huge mainframes and the tape and everything. And then they started coming out with these computers that people could have at home, a personal PC. And then they had this thing called Radio Shack. So again, I might be dating myself here, but for those of you that remember Radio Shack, Radio Shack was awesome. It used to have all these little gadgets and little pieces of technology of things like little robots and all that. And our dad used to take us there when he had us. And one of the things that he saw was this thing called a Candy Color Computer 3. So there was the 1, the 2, and the 3. I hear a shout out for the Commodore. We actually had that one too. That just goes to show how my dad, even though we grew up in poverty, my dad and my family, my dad especially leading the way, would pull together the money it took to get the technology, to expose us to that technology. So my dad was a strong believer that the technology that he was seeing coming along was going to be the way of the future. I happen to have the ingrained capability, or um, dang, the word just escaped me, but I have the capability of learning code, which I would not have learned about if my dad hadn't exposed us by getting us a Tandy Color Computer 3, which had the book called Extended Color Basic. I actually took that book and I read through it, and I went through all of the exercises and taught myself to code out of that book. From there, I went to a high school, which was a citywide school, or some of you might think of it as a magnet school. It was the top citywide school in Baltimore. It's called Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, where the focus was on engineering and science. When I went there, I had both engineering, lots of engineering and lots of science courses. I actually was about to become a geneticist because I took genetics in high school. I really loved genetics. I was really good at it. Um, but when I did the research, I was like, it's going to take me forever to do what I wanted to do, and that was work on the Human Genome Project. The other thing I got to do, though, was one computer science class. It was called Extended Basic. Of course, I'd already done Extended Basic, so I basically breezed through the class. And I was helping people with their homework and trying to help people, coach people and teach them how to code. And then some people, I would just do their work for them because I was like, you guys are hopeless. You're never going to learn. You just don't have the capability. So I just do enough for them so they could pass out of the class. But that experience led me to think about computer science, entering the field of computer science. And when I looked to see how much I could get paid right out of the gate, which was $40,000 a year at the time, I was like, yep, that's the one I'm doing, as opposed to being a junior geneticist at, I think it was like 15 or 20,000 or something like that. It's like, I'm going for that. So I went to Howard my first year, but I basically finished up my studies at Towson University and got my computer science degree there. On to my early days and early adventures in the tech field. So that brought me to have to move from Baltimore City to King George, Virginia, which is where there's a base, there's a military base called Naval Surface Warfare Center, Dahlgren Division. But before I worked for Naval Surface Warfare Dahlgren Division, I actually worked for CSC first. But then I ended up getting laid off there because 9/11 happened. It was already hard enough time getting clearances. I didn't have my clearance. They tried to keep me. It just got to the point where it was just like, we don't know when you're going to get your clearance. So they laid me off. I ended up going to work for the government directly. Got my clearance in a month, of course. Whatever. Still a little salty about that, but I'm going to continue on. I was at NAVC for 5 years. And then I left and I went to another contractor called Khaki. Then after that, I basically kind of got an opportunity to do a little switching up. And that switch up was to move into SharePoint. I got approached by somebody at Second Corps Consulting, and they were like, you know how to do coding. You should be able to do SharePoint. So they brought me out. They showed me where SharePoint was. I was like, I'm not sure what this is, but sure, shoot. When I was a government employee, I had to learn how to code all types of things. I never had any experience with coding. So sure, I could do this. I got this. So I get there and they're showing me, and I look at the URL and it says ASPX. So I'm like, oh, yeah, I can just code, it's just ASPX code. I got this. At the time I got pregnant. I was pregnant, my second child, and I knew how the turmoil of being pregnant and trying to commute. Second court was an hour away. This other company called SDC was 5 minutes away. Both of them gave me a job offer. I took SDC because it was closer. Also, SharePoint, I found out, paid a whole lot more. I got like a $25,000 pay raise just for moving from applications development and some intranet development over into SharePoint. So I was happy. Ended up getting laid off from SDC though, because they were connected to the Navy. The Navy was going down as far as funding for ships. My contract was connected to one of those ships that died. That meant I was out of a job. But that's cool because I ended up going to Booz Allen Hamilton. At Booz Allen, I did some SharePoint 2007, and I also did some SharePoint 2010, along with Designer 2007, Designer 2010, InfoPath 2007, and InfoPath 2010. While I was at Booz, I can't remember exactly how I got into the user groups, but somehow I ended up in these three user groups. FedSpug and Women in SharePoint are basically one user group, but they have different meeting times because they're run by the same people. And joined SUGBC, where I became the chair for speakers, finance speakers. That voyage with SharePoint in the user group community, and also from being a consultant, led me to start thinking, hey, I know how to do stuff. Maybe I could do stuff for myself. And then it kind of cemented for me when I found out how much Booz Allen was paying me versus how much they were charging for me. And then how much work I was actually doing a lot of times because they wouldn't staff the contracts correctly. But neither here nor there. They weren't very good at SharePoint contracts back then. I don't know how they are now. So not really talking bad about them, but that made me start thinking about, okay, maybe I need to step out on my own. And that caused me to start a company called Carter McGowan Services, where I did SharePoint Online and Office 365 because it happened to come out the year before I started my company. And when I started it, I was looking around like, okay, so I need SharePoint so I can practice. How much does SharePoint Server cost? SharePoint Server costs a lot. What else can I do? And I happened to trip into Office 365. And I also happened to trip into being a Microsoft partner. I have a whole nother presentation on that if anybody ever wants to hear that part. But after I became a partner, I worked on SharePoint Online, but I also still worked on 2007 and 2010 engagements as well. Then I sold my company and I started working for another company called C3. And C3 is the company I actually sold it to, where I still was basically doing the same thing, just running that business inside of C3. During my journey of having a business or going into the SharePoint space, joining a user group, having a business, selling a business, working for another partner, all the way until now, up until me joining Microsoft, I had gotten into a lot of different things. So the picture that you saw on the page, my first intro page to me, was a picture that I had taken when I was in China. And that trip came from me joining Voices for Innovation as a partner, because I was a part of this thing called IAMCP, which is an International Association of Microsoft channel partners. I got involved with VFI, and I got an opportunity to go to China. Got opportunities to be interviewed by different parts of the Microsoft business about what I was doing as a small business and the things that I saw as being a small business owner. Did lots of speaking, SharePoint Saturdays, SharePoint Fest. Um, there's a SharePoint conference in Texas that I keep forgetting the name of. I got to speak at Microsoft's partner conference, Inspire. Um, Other conferences that I can't remember the names of that I actually spoke at. I actually ran some conferences as well. There was Cloud One Day. There was the Office 365 Day. I ran a couple of user groups besides SharePoint user group. I also ran a user group with another person called Mobile First, Cloud First for a bit. Was on the board for FedSpug and for Women in SharePoint. So lots of different opportunities, articles written on me, videos, all of that stuff. Got to become a Microsoft MVP for a whole month. And then after that, I basically got the opportunity to join Microsoft. And all of that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the community. If it wasn't for me joining the community, and not just joining the community, but also networking in the community, meeting with people, talking with people, sharing my experience, hear about their experience, share best practices, sharing coding things, saying yes to things like speaking for a user group or speaking at a user group, saying yes to opportunities that came by, like being able to join Voices for Innovation, being able to join the 3 Microsoft boards that I was on at a time. All of that would not have come about if it wasn't for the community that I was a part of. But not just the community, it's also being a part of the community, actually being active in the community, networking, attending the meetings, things like this, eating pizza. I mean, you would think, you can't be too social with pizza in your mouth, but you actually can. Talking to people and sharing your experiences. There's a bunch of different pictures here that actually have me in the picture. And this deck I actually got from another SharePoint person, which is Fabian Williams. So a lot of these pictures out of this deck came from him, but it actually kind of surprised me that I was in some of these pictures. Anyway, you join the community, you learn, you grow, and you share the knowledge. You network. You have to put in stuff in order to get stuff back out. It's a cycle. You teach, you collaborate, you exchange, you learn, you teach, collaborate, exchange, learn. Or you can start from the learn part. You learn, then maybe you start teaching, start collaborating and exchanging. It doesn't have to be a cycle exactly like that, but it basically is a thing that you have to put some energy and effort into, because you will get back out of it what you put in, but you do need to put it in. You also need to figure out ways to work on your personal brand. Being part of a community can help you with your personal brand, because people will know who you are. When they see your Twitter stuff, they'll be more likely to follow you because they've seen you in person. When they see that you posted something on LinkedIn, they'll be more likely to connect with you. Even when it comes to on the job front, having the being out there, knowing people just casually, people get to know that you know your stuff. You probably will find out that one of those people that you were talking to, just casually helping them with a certain problem they had in SharePoint or in Dynamics or in Office 365, if that happens to be more your speed. Next thing you know, they're offering you a job because they know you know your stuff. So it helps you define and build your personal brand as well. Remember, you don't want to be this guy. This guy is like, if you can't read the words on it, but he's like, you kids today with your cloud computers and your SharePoint, In my day, we attached files to emails and we liked it that way. And the guy that's talking is only like 2 years older than the guy that he's talking to. Don't be that guy, okay? Move along with the technology. Be the person that is actively a part of the community, but also is actively moving forward. Because if you don't, you become the dinosaurs. And you know what happened to the dinosaurs, right? Yep. Okay. So I want to give a big shout out to Fabian, because Fabian is the one, like I said, that gave me these, a lot of the slides that I used in this deck. This is another example of a place where the SharePoint community, being a part of the community, helped me out. I needed a deck to be able to talk to the Lawrence SharePoint user group when I first I created it for another user group, and then I also presented it as the Lawrence SharePoint user group online. I needed a deck. I reached out to Fabian because Fabian had given another talk on importance of SharePoint community at SharePoint Saturday, Virginia Beach. And I was like, hey, I could probably rip those off and not have to recreate the wheel. And he gave them to me because he knows me. Anywho, I got finished a whole heck of a lot quicker than I normally get finished, I guess, because I'm worried about my next meeting. So if any of you guys have any questions, let me know. Yeah, and Fabian did prove to his daughter today that 1 equals 2, which I'm not even going to go there because I like math, but not that much. It's too much. I'll post my thank you and information for reaching out to me and see if you guys have any questions. All come at me at once.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to personally testify, right? Like, like you said, you get out of the community what you put into it. I'd say that you get out of the community 10 times what you put into it if you put something in. I've just doing a little bit gives you get back a whole lot.
Yeah.
And that's
well, definitely. You can tell your story, Joe, about how didn't you move because of community too?
I was, and Scott's here, so that's good. So, like you said, networking, and you never know when somebody helping you out is going to get you your next job. I was a training guy. I did 20 years in the Navy as a linguist. I was not an IT guy. Never was. Fell into SharePoint in 2014. Bought a copy of SharePoint for Dummies 2013. Right? That's in 2014. And hooked up with Scott here.
I was a heavy smoker. We went to smoking area a lot.
Networking. But
smoking
he helped me out with some
things,
got me involved in the SharePoint community at work, which I now co-lead. So that's great. And I ended up switching careers to become, right now I'm a SharePoint site collection administrator, and then soon I'm going to be an Office 365 architect because we're switching to that. But wouldn't have been able to do any of that if it hadn't been for the community. Going to the meetings, learning from the meetings, learning from people, going to the SharePoint Saturdays, attending the webinars, and without an ounce of formal education, managed to switch my careers, 20% pay raise instantly, and guaranteed work until I retire, until I decide I want to retire. So
yeah, so I mean, you got paid in pizza.
Exactly.
And sandwiches. And then you got actual paid in real greens.
Yes.
So, you know,
You
it's freaking
missed
awesome.
American Philly with jalapeno and cheddar, don't you, Nikia?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
I do miss it. When you said that, I actually tasted it for a second. I could taste the deliciousness.
Yeah, I ordered one a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it was the only place I could get my pizza fix because the only people in my family that like it are me and my son, and he's 9, so he doesn't get a vote. We get outvoted by the rest of the family all the time.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, that's what I miss the most about
One
having
note,
this
yay.
in person, because my wife would let me have pizza, and here at the house, I'm not allowed to have pizza. It sucks. But I
what
have
about you?
alcohol.
What about you, bro?
You know, um, some of y'all might know my good buddy Thomas Carpe out of Baltimore.
Tom.
He's legally blind, uses a magnifying glass and a 36-inch monitor to write some of the most beautiful code you'd ever see.
He is freaking awesome.
And I remember one day at a SharePoint Saturday, I was the peanut gallery for him. And I was saying some stuff, and he's like, "Why don't you speak one day?" And so I did. And I've been hooked on this shit ever since. Because I always had something to say, because we've all got war stories. And the deeper you are in the government, the worse they happen to be. Because, the government, by its very nature, is going to be the most inept organization you could support. And so I had my fair share of war stories to tell. And, I figured out how to do all kinds of things with the restrictions that the government would put on our environment. And I was able to provide some decent feedback and provide my own sessions, and I got to speak. I've gone down as far as Atlanta to speak, and as far north as Hartford, as far west as Connecticut, and I've spoken at Virginia Beach a couple times, and I love it. The community is awesome. Being able to reach out to people who've written the books that you find in the stores and actually get a response is amazing. It's really cool. I didn't have the speaker lined up right. The person I thought I was going to get couldn't do it, and so I reached out to Nikia, and because the network that we grow within the community is as strong as it is, Nikia was able to jump on board and speak tonight. If I had just been somebody who had not been part of the community and was reaching out to cold call, I don't know if I would have gotten that same response back. Highly unlikely. The SharePoint world is fairly small, and once you get in and you start to know people, they start to know you back, and it's amazing. Getting Jeff Teeper to like my tweets, like that made me so giddy, like a schoolgirl with a brand new doll.
I saw him a little while after I joined Microsoft, and I was like, "Hey, Jeff, I don't know if you remember me," because he was like, "No, I remember you. I know you." It was blah blah. I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
Yeah.
hey, hey."
It's amazing because like my heroes, right? I grew up and my heroes were no longer superheroes, but they were SharePoint people. I've had beer with all of them.
Yeah.
And it's so cool.
When I
love
did
it.
Virginia Beach, speaking of Jeff Teeper, right? So at the end, I volunteered to do since I was one of the speakers, I volunteered to do one of the little wrap up, the little fun things, like we played a pretend game show. But then they had the surprise at the end, which was Jeff Teeper speaking via phone while we were still on stage. Like we were doing that. And when they announced who he was, and now our surprise, end note speaker is going to be Jeff Teeper with the history of SharePoint from the guy who basically made it.
Pretty much.
me and Ashley Rogers, who works with Mark Rackley, we were up on stage sitting next to each other. We both like hunkered down and like fangirled. We were like, oh my God, it's Jeff Deeper. I'm on stage with Jeff Deeper. Sort of, maybe, not really, but okay. Yeah. Telling stories of the fact that he's still got a gold CD-ROM of the SharePoint Foundation that was designed to be like put on desktops for testing. I was like, I want that so much. Put it on eBay. Whatever you pay, I'll pay it. Yeah.
So what got you guys on the phone? Joel, I know you probably have your own stories.
Yeah, actually I
Call
do.
on you.
Yeah, actually I do. Can you hear me fine?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I'm just in the middle of a migration here, but yeah, as usual. But I've met. Didn't you guys know Gary Sheffitz?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was my hero because back in the day when I switched from Project Server to SharePoint, this was like 2002, 2003. He was the man for properly installing SharePoint 2003 and getting it done right.
Mm-hmm.
He had the best book out at the time for doing that. And I met him at Microsoft in Redmond at the conference. And he was my hero before Tepper. So yeah, the community is great. But yeah, SharePoint has brought me a long way from the Project Server days. And I actually do know the guys who actually invented Project Server. And I remember them lamenting SharePoint taking over when Tepper came in. Yeah, so I've been through all of that. But yeah, SharePoint is great. And I'm not a developer, but there's a lot to do in the administration and architecture field. So that's where I'm headed right now, trying to get recertified so we can keep our gold certification here. So
Yeah, so I was more in a developer training consultant, designer side, not as heavy in design, but architecture, I could talk to it, but Lord, when I had clients that needed SharePoint architecture work, I talk to that first piece and then I call in somebody. So I'm
yeah,
calling in like a like an Amy Cisse, for those of you to know her.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I was a mainframe guy and then a mini
Mhm.
coming out of college, so I was already back office person. So it was a natural thing for me to go into that.
I was always making a C, solid C. That was
No,
everything else excelling at, but
just enough programming just to patch things up. I leave that to you guys.
Everything I know about code, I know by hitting F12.
Yeah, I mean, I can get by pretty well in PowerShell though. That's about as far as I go.
yeah, but then when you can't get by, like me with my clients and their extra special needs on architecture, and I call up one of my SharePoint friends again, community. When I
Yep.
needed somebody, I was able to reach out, even though I'm paying them, to do it. Imagine having the money to pay somebody,
Yeah.
but you don't have anybody that you can rely on.
Before the community got big, everybody was in Google Groups back in the day. I'm not sure if anybody was ever doing that, but everybody was in Google Groups.
Mm-hmm.
Back in probably 2005 to 2008, something like that. Yeah, that's where I met everybody before I saw them physically.
Yeah. So Tisha's asking who or what is the resource, and that kind of ties into this whole thing. Tisha, I would have to say that there isn't a single resource, and that's kind of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
As Nikki pointed out, this thing's been moving so fast for so long. No one place, no one area can be a single resource for it. There are pieces all over the place. But by following people on Twitter and following the people that they follow on Twitter, by learning the websites that they post on Twitter or in the group, or when you go to a SharePoint Saturday, exactly. You get help and then they'll send you web pages, and you'll be able to follow blogs, and you kind of just settle into, you'll find the resources that make sense to you, and then those will suggest other resources.
Yeah. So Brew put in the
Yeah.
chat hashtag SP help, which is still very active. I mean, I would say if you are very new to SharePoint, please learn the basics first. There's so many people that jump straight into being an admin or being the architect. You have to know how it works from a end user perspective first, then build your way up. So just in case, I'm not saying you don't know, because you might know. You might know Tisha. Sorry, I was trying to remember who asked the question. You might already know, but if you don't know how things work from an end user perspective, make sure you start from there. Also, you could reach out to me. I can give you some of the resources that I used to use.
Okay, I unmuted.
Well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
they
I
stopped
found you.
yelling.
Yes, I'm on Twitter, so I'll just follow you on Twitter and hit you up. I will do that.
You can follow me at SP Superheroes.
SP Superheroes.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
I think you even got the website too, right? Right, Brew? Or you used to
Yep.
anyway.
Yeah.
That's
So
spectacular.
SharePoint.
Yeah, and you will, as soon as you start that one step down that path, the people you start following will suggest others and suggest others and suggest others. I had followed. I wasn't even on Twitter when I went to my first SharePoint Saturday in New York City back 2 years ago. The blog about it's on SharePointSuperheroes.com.
Okay.
But I walked out of there with 8 people to follow. Or maybe
nice.
no, I walked out of there with 20 people to follow, because the 8 people, the 5 or 6 that I saw, they all quoted and provided Twitter handles for people who had taught them stuff. Now I'm up to 200 following or whatever, but I have weaponized my Twitter, and it's only about SharePoint or Office 365. But very rapidly, you will discover all the resources that you need. And so,
yeah, and if you don't, just ask. Yeah, just ask. If you really need like a beginner resource, just ask. If you need if you're at a specific spot and you're just like, crap, I don't know how to do this one thing. Or these few things, just ask.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's so many resources out there. That's the problem.
Yeah,
there's so many. There's so much. Like all these conferences now that all the conferences have been canceled. They're all going virtual. There's so many. Like, oh my gosh. Like
a beautiful thing about SharePoint is the very nature of the product is that it encourages sharing, right? So the people who get involved with this platform are more likely to share their knowledge more than other IT people in general.
Yeah,
SharePoint people are more likely to be extroverted than introverted compared to the rest of your IT field.
Yeah, just a few words of caution. Sorry, are you done yet? You're not done yet, Bert.
Just saying that, we post so much to blogs and to YouTube and stuff like that, that people like me, right? I'm waiting for inspiration to write a blog post because I can't write anything negative about my customer. So I'm begging for people to say, hey, how do I do this? Because that gives me an excuse to write a blog post on how to do it, where I'm not negatively saying something about my client.
Okay. Okay.
Tisha, are you when you say admin, are you like on premises SharePoint, or are you Office 365?
It's Office 365. It's so weird because we had the person who was a SharePoint admin before me. She left the organization, and we're just kind of our on-prem SharePoint we're leaving it to die. She left, and then she came back, but I'd been given the SharePoint online admin. So now she does one side of it, and she knows everything about SharePoint on that side. and now I'm learning SharePoint online, and I'm coming from a sysadmin help desk kind of weird,
Mhm.
strange role. So I know SharePoint as a user.
Excellent.
Um,
Good.
yeah,
Good.
but in terms
You're
of
like me.
being able to do it, like it's it's a little weird for me.
Well, don't think of it as a negative though, because
No.
I've met so many developers who know how to develop on the web, but they don't understand the SharePoint platform at all. And they
Mhm.
will spend all day long reinventing the wheel whenever SharePoint already has a way to
Yep.
accomplish whatever it is that they're going to do.
And
I know
that's
a
why I
developer.
always say learn as an end user first. If you have never touched SharePoint, even if you have like the quasi skill, like me in the beginning, thinking, "Oh, I'll just code everything," I was wrong because I came from being a developer, like doing like high level C sharp and Visual Basic and all of that stuff, C++ coding and stuff like that. So I look at ASPX and I'm like, huh, it's just a coding language. It was not.
No.
It's based on it, but it's not. I think Gina said that she had developed a OneNote, did a OneNote tutorial
Mm-hmm.
based on what you learned from Joe.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
just connecting the dots for your community and how you can't always expect what you're going to learn or how you might use it. And so yeah, it was like months ago. Joe did a tutorial on OneNote. And I'm like, I know OneNote. And he taught me like a bazillion things I never knew OneNote could do. And so yeah, like we have an internal company user group. And so one of the meetings was trying to keep people introduced to the platform. And so we did an entire hour on OneNote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sweet.
That's how I keep
That's
my bullet journal for my bosses, my government leads. They can come in and look at my bullet journal that I have in OneNote.
Mm-hmm.
I use a completely different product for personal
Love OneNote.
purposes, but
yeah,
So
and
I do have a question though related to what you guys were just talking about with developers getting into SharePoint. Is that we've got I don't know how many hundreds of like classic developers employed in the company, and they've been laying off IT people left and right. So there is a core group of developers who are trying to learn the Office 365 platform as a way to segue and basically keep their jobs. And I've been asked to basically get them up to speed through like either app in a day or some other approach to figure out how to teach them. And the first handful that I've worked with have like the most negative opinion of SharePoint as a storage platform because it's not SQL, it's not relational, and I'm like just dumbfounded. Like, how do you have any recommendations on how to talk to developers in a way that they will approach SharePoint and accept it for what it is, and not be like, I hate this.
Well, the first thing I would be like is, you like your job?
yeah.
Want to keep your job, do you?
Right.
Yeah. So
So we're
I
trying
think you
to
better
Yeah.
figure it out.
If-
Power Apps and Power Automate and Power BI and the stuff that really lends to that more advanced developer, but we're using SharePoint as the storage because we don't currently have access to Azure SQL or some of the other premium connectors.
Mhm.
you don't need that. If these folks understand JavaScript, then they can run Node.js, they can run the SharePoint framework, they can learn how to create awesome things, and the same stuff that's used for SharePoint framework is used for Teams, and they can build anything that connects everything else in Office 365. They don't have to go straight to SharePoint. They can do they can do Teams, they can do other things,
Mhm.
just because they
They can
know
make Office
Node.js,
add-ins.
JavaScript,
the graph.
and and React.js. If they
Okay.
can learn those things, they can go so very far
I would say
in a niche that just doesn't have the people to
nope.
fill all the
Does not.
slots.
It does
There,
not.
there's
And
never enough.
I would say being a developer and coming from being an applications developer, just tell them to think of it as a new adventure.
Yeah.
It's new stuff to learn.
Yeah, and
This is going to keep you fresh. The other thing is that a lot of times developers are creative, but they like using the tools that they like using.
Mhm.
Tell them, think about the creative side. There are ways to get back to some of the tools that you like using, like if they are high level coding language person versus like C sharp. versus a more lower level coding language or client side language like JavaScript. They can choose their tool, but it's a new part of their life, and if they want to keep the job, they're just gonna have to suck it up.
I mean, I'm
don't
a
have a lot
Linux
of-
guy. I love Linux. I have Linux running on every single box that I own in my house. And I run Teams from Linux. I run SharePoint Framework from Linux. And I run Visual Studio Code from Linux. I haven't had to open up a Windows machine in months. Okay? So these people who are like, oh, I hate Microsoft, you know what? They can still code onto this platform.
Oh, and
Yeah.
get them involved in GitHub.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
That's another thing that developers normally like, when they get to see other people's code and they can contribute to it,
Yep.
or take it and then build their own thing. That
Yep.
might also get them excited too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
that's
if
actually-
anyone wants, I can send you a quick little script on how to change it so it's no longer master and slave, but main instead.
But no, that's actually really helpful feedback, because I'm got into the platform as a super user. So I use Power Apps and all that kind of stuff from the front end. I am not a developer, so I don't know Node.js, and I never even thought about the graph and apps for Teams and any of that kind of stuff as a potential segue. So yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's
Get-
lots of
getting my
different
old company on-
flavors.
Getting my old company onto Teams was the best thing ever.
Yes,
they're using
thank you.
SharePoint. They have no idea that they're using SharePoint. And it's just because SharePoint is the back end to all the Teams stuff that they're doing.
Well, Teams
They
is,
are
yeah.
living on Teams.
Yeah,
The-
we do,
Teams is the,
the word.
I'd say it's going to be the biggest money maker for Microsoft for the next 2 to 3 years because of just how much people love using Teams.
Yes.
So
One of
much
the
better.
ways that I've found to get people beyond the SharePoint sucks or I don't like SharePoint cuz is that Office 365 is so huge and so deep that there is no way that you can be the expert
Nope.
on everything. And so I always ask people, like, when they're trying to get into it, or where they're joining up, I was like, what do you like to do? What is it about IT? What is it about all this stuff that you like to do, that is fun for you? And some people like coding, some people like interface, some people like interacting with the customers, some people like this. And I was like, great, you want to focus on this part of Office 365, Azure development, or the graph, or whatever. And if you can find those hooks in your developers, you can push them in the right places, and then you have your own homegrown experts, because it's got to be a team thing. There is no way to be, the expert on hooking up the graph to Teams, to SharePoint, to Azure, to Active Directory, all that. So
just please make sure that they understand SharePoint first before they start going off and building everything.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
For no
I
freaking
had a
reason.
developer
Yeah. Crawl, walk,
spent
run. Okay.
2 weeks.
Crawl, walk, run.
Yeah.
I'm with my new client. They have a SharePoint Center of Excellence that manages all the governance and everything else. And on the SharePoint Community of Practice site, they have given themselves labels of expert,
Ugh,
and they just
aren't.
don't always fit the role of an expert.
Yeah, I had a
They're
developer
plenty
spent
smart for plenty of
who
other
spent
areas
2
when it comes to web
weeks
development, but not
in
SharePoint
visual.
specifically.
I had a developer who spent 2 weeks specially coding in Visual Basic. And when he was done, it was a roster list. And when he was done, I looked at it. All he had done was in SharePoint 20, for SharePoint 2013, he had made a boxed, no labels style view.
Yep.
I sat down and I did it in a minute. I was like, look, this is what you made. He goes, what's this? I was like, oh my God, you suck. Anyway, right? Like, so developers can get wrapped around the axle around the code. But,
Yeah, they can.
But if you can find the hook that got them into IT, like what do they like to do? Try that.
Yeah, and for some of them, they're just not going to get there, and they'll just not be there. That's all. You know,
So
but
the topic I present at SharePoint Saturdays, so when I do it, is like basic, it's just the how to build, like go through a swim lane, talk to people about process, user case, and all the rest. And half my audience is IT developers and server guys from the basement who are trying to transform their jobs because there isn't a basement anymore.
Yep. I don't
There is
usually
a
advertise
server.
I don't usually advertise myself as a SharePoint developer. I advertise myself as a business analyst with mad SharePoint skills.
Yeah.
Because that's really what I am. I'm helping them solve business problems. And here, click, 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 it's done in SharePoint. You don't need to write all the code. You don't need to wait for new accreditation. You don't need to wait through all that garbage that they would normally have to do if they're building on a brand new platform.
Yep. So I think, Jenna and Tisha, like I think I'm with you. I was a end user to power user to site admin to okay, here I am now. I don't have any preconceptions. I don't have any, well, this is how it's done things. And that is freeing. Because all I have to do is find out how other people have done it.
And a lot of times there's already somebody that did it. Yeah.
Think of how much time people could have saved if they'd done a simple Google search every time they're presented with a problem.
You know what? That's a good point too, because by going to these community meetings, by going to SharePoint Saturdays or webinars or finding the right blogs, you start to learn the terms and you start to learn the right words. And then your Google foo for finding the solutions is amazing. And once you do that, you're finding even more resources because you found the best practice through Google.
Yeah. Jana, I wanted to answer a question on what did I miss most about InfoPath. Just the sheer crazy amount of things that I used to create using InfoPath. And then I also figured out or was taught by one of my managers back when I worked at Booz Allen, how to build workflow into InfoPath without using Designer. So InfoPath, I just did a lot of crazy, cool things with InfoPath, so I miss it. But then I started to learn how to do those things in Power Apps, and now I'm not a dev anymore, so I don't get to do any of that anymore. I just get the ooh and ah at the presentations. Mark, I don't think you've spoken up yet. Did you have anything you wanted to say before I hop off of here? Because I got to leave in like 3 minutes.
Yep.
Just want to give you an opportunity in case you had a war story or something. No, Mark? Daryl, looks like you unmuted.
Oh, me?
Yeah, you did unmute a second ago.
No, I was just going to say I missed the pink door.
The pink door?
Yeah, in Seattle.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was like, what? There was a pink door? What? Did I miss something?
I don't know.
Only Seattle people would know about that. If you get down.
Yeah, I don't
it's near.
I have not been venturing.
It's near the original Starbucks. I'll tell you that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Now I know what you're talking about.
Inside joke.
Right there. You have to know it's there. That's the thing. That's why I have to see.
Yeah, now I know what you're talking about. Okay. Yeah. Mark,
the original Starbucks, the source of the infection. Got it.
I'm gonna hit stop on the recording, okay, folks?
Alrighty.
Yeah, I gotta jump too. I gotta get back to my migration here, but it was good.
It was great chatting with all of you guys. Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.